Hello and welcome to the TMG Fireside Chat. I'm your host, John Mackey. In this episode, we continue our discussion with John Demeter in part 2 of our 2023 year in review. As we discussed in the first episode, we talk a lot about consolidation. We talk about recent activity on the OEM side, specifically the Potter acquisition by KKR. And we also talk about some other activities in the industry as a whole. We continue that conversation here in this episode. We talk about some of the challenges the industry is facing. We talk about some of the obstacles that we addressed as an industry in 2023. And we share some perspectives on the strength of the overall economy and the growth of the industry as a whole. So with that, I will turn it back over to our podcast with John Demeter. We hope that you enjoy our discussion.
We talked about some of the challenges to the industry, right? We talked about the fluoroketone issue. We talked about the AIM Act and HFCs. Mm-hmm. Any other challenges that you see that, the industry's either trying to figure out or is almost solved?
Well, I think there's a labor issue, a labor shortage issue, which everybody's going through. I don't think it's new. I think it pre-existed COVID. It got worse after COVID. The labor force employment rate is dropped, dangerously low, and the pool of people out there, just don't exist. So I think labor, but again, it's not new. I remember being in an FSSA meeting, 5 or 7 years ago, saying, "Who thinks this is a big problem?" And every installer's hand went up that it's getting labor. And if you follow some of these distributors on social media, LinkedIn, they're all looking for technicians, all of them. They all need people. Yeah. So I think that's an ongoing problem. You like to think that some lessons have been learned from the general population about how to gear yourself for future income, and it's not necessarily by going to a college. It's by learning a trade, and you'd like to think that maybe over time that will work itself out. Interesting commentary I heard and I'd heard this before. Someone said that that old saying that if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. They go, that's really dumb, really dumb. You shouldn't focus on doing something you love. You should focus on something you're good at, and you can earn a living from. Then you can work on your passion. But if you've got a passion for something that doesn't pay anything, it's silly to follow your passion. It's But anyway, so I hope the labor thing can work its way out in time.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a generation, right? To your point, I was at Tyco Ansel. I remember giving a presentation. This is when I was working for Mark Vandover at a senior leadership meeting. I gave a presentation to George Oliver, long before he was the CEO of Tyco or JCI, and just said, from a labor perspective, we're going to have to start to figure out what we're going to do to recruit. This is just the manufacturing labor that we would need to keep up with growth. Yeah. Right. Especially when you live in manufacturing plants were in towns that were receding with population, not growing, right? Yeah. So, and back then the leadership team kind of just chalked it up. Well, that's just baby boomer stuff, right? We know the baby boomers are going to leave, but no one dealt with it. That was 15 years ago, John. And now roll it forward. Here we are. The service trade, the software guys put out a presentation about how they're, the impact that artificial intelligence, AI, could have on the service industry from a benefit. How can you use AI to kind of run your business a little bit better? And one of the statistics they ran or presented was we are losing 8% of our skilled labor force. This is across all of service industries. 8% of our skilled labor force every year. And it's not being replaced, or it's being replaced at less than 2% a year. You've got this chasm that,
are you talking about the trades? You're talking about plumbers?
All trades, all fire, HVAC, mechanical, electricians, plumbers, all trades.
Well,
right?
Well,
So, so there's, and I think the part of that, the solution is going to be, technology, and how to use technology to get more work done.
yeah.
Right? I'm not advocating that AI is the solution, but I'm going to say, how do you, we just passed, or this year NFPA, enacted NFPA 915 about remote inspection. Right. Well, if the fire marshal, fire service can't get an inspector out there to take a look at it, number one, and number two, the fire protection contractor can't get a technician out there routinely to look at it. All right, then let's make it smart.
Yeah.
All right. At least then the computer's telling us that it's active and it's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So
I think
we're seeing more and more of that.
Yeah, didn't Lee Kaiser give a good presentation at FSSA a couple of years ago on that remote inspection thing? Yeah.
Yes. I gave a presentation 4 years ago. It was actually the first presentation I gave saying, hey, this thing is coming. Lee followed 2 years later and said, oh, it's here. And then Joe McElveen just gave a town hall through FSSA webinar about smart buildings. And it was a code enforcement official talking about what they're seeing with regard to smart buildings. And it's rolling. It's in markets all around us every day right now. Line of sight from a traditional fire protection contractor, we don't see it because it's coming through building controls, it's coming through the security folks, and it's going to work its way into fire. So we've got to be prepared for it. And I'm going to say be prepared for it, not from a negative perspective, be prepared for it and own it. Right? How do you roll out a service that puts that device on a fire pump that reports automatically? How do you put that device on a riser to check pressure, right? Or flow? I mean, it's there, right? So, but I do agree with you. I think our greatest challenge is labor, and how do we deal with it? And we need to, be a bit more creative. And find ways to continue to retain people.
And I guess along with that, you talk about the retiring baby boomers. I mean, there's a knowledge base there that is disappearing. And hopefully, like we said earlier, younger people getting into leadership positions in the industry. That's a great thing. And the baby boomers are probably hanging around a lot longer than they were in the past. The people our age, and I get that, and that's kind of a good thing, unless you're taking a spot that a 50-year-old should be occupying. But that's on a case-by-case basis, I guess.
But I think I was talking to a childhood friend of mine who's in the fire space. He lives in Chicago. He's a fire protection engineer for a huge contractor on the construction side, not fire related, but he's the FPE for them. And he asked me, he goes, okay, I've got my nice sets, I've got my engineering stamp, but one thing I don't have is commissioning certificates. And I've got a job in California and I need to be commissioned. I need a certificate to commission systems. And for me to go hire the guy who I used for a long time who's getting ready to retire, do I go get that? And I'm like, you go get that. Right? You live in Chicago, but go do commissioning work in California. That's what we need. It's just where does the market take us? Where the customer take us? And go get the training or take the test to get certified.
Hey, before we get too far off this, I want to ask you a question. We touched on the AMAX and fluoroketones and what it means for HFCs and in the space. Do you see that? Do you see no problem? Do you see smooth sailing on the part of the manufacturers? I'm not talking about the fluoroketone manufacturer, but the equipment manufacturer. See smooth sailing there with fluoroketones? You think it's going to be all okay? Or do you think...
Yeah, because we don't have an alternative. We don't have an alternative gas in development anywhere.
Well, I mean, but they'll say, well, that's not our problem, guys. Go figure it out. Go back to sand and buckets, sodium bicarb.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I've learned through the whole process, and as you know, John, I didn't grow up in this industry. I've been here 17 years, but, you've got, mutual friends of ours that have been here for, 35, 40 years. And they've got the scars to show it. And talking to them, and I agree, because it makes sense, we've got to get back to the fundamentals. And what I've talked about from the FSSA perspective, what I've talked about in other podcasts is that when I say the fundamentals, rather than take a specification that's given to you from the owner on a project and taking it line and verse and saying, yep, I'll do what I can to match that specification, let's go back a step and say, has anyone done a hazard analysis on it? Right? If you do any battery work now in NFPA 855, you got to do an HMA, right? Which is a hazard analysis to really assess the whole system and what do we have to protect, right? And I think it forces us, rather than take what's written in the specification and say you're going to use FM200 XXX, right, for this, and this, right? Well, wait a minute. Let's take a step back. Does the room still meet the requirement for FM200? Or does the room still meet the requirement for a clean agent gas, right? And I'm not saying we got to flip it to go to Energen or water mist or whatever, but let's take a step back and really validate whether or not that specification's right.
Yeah.
Because I think what happens a lot against the path of least resistance, this is just human nature, and I don't have specific instances, but this is just my instincts. It's the path of least resistance. Manufacturer comes in and gives the architect a specification book, and everything's in there. Here's your specs for HVAC, here's your specs for plumbing, here's your specs, here's the toilet you're going to use, here's the lighting you're going to use, here's the fire extinguisher you're going to use, the size of the cabinet, the manufacturer of the cabinet, and oh, by the way, here's the clean agent system you're going to use. Right. Well, let's talk about this and really assess, is that the right application? So I think that's what the manufacturers are trying to push everyone to say, there are numerous applications for a given system: inerts, water mist, and clean agent gas.
I was in a conversation with Dan Hubert the other day, and Dan reminded me that he raised this subject 4 or 5 years ago, and that's a new program that the FSA, I think officially they've taken it up. I don't know if it's progressing. Is a hazard analysis book, a guideline on just what you're talking about here. So hopefully that's in the works.
Yeah, it just gets us back to fundamentals and what we've done what we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. The evolution of FK, the evolution of FM200, or not, it's definitely been around for a while, but just how do you continue to apply it, right?
Yeah. Hey, I wonder, maybe this is apropos. And I put a call into Rick Seidel. We haven't talked yet, and I wanted him to explain to me what their new agent is for dealing with lithium-ion battery fires. Fight Blue, is that what it's called? Blue? Have you seen
something
that?
like that? Yeah, something blue. Yeah, I've seen that. Yes. Good luck when you find out. Let me know.
Is that the answer? Is that the answer?
I don't know. We don't know what's in the bottle.
But he got back here right. He said, "Yeah, let's talk." Because I told him I wanted to run something in the Halon Herald about it, but help me understand what it is and how it works.
But first and foremost, I'm all for new product. I mean, I love to see the manufacturers come out with something new. Fike is usually out there pushing it, the envelope. SIBO's out there always trying to do stuff. Janus is always trying to do stuff out there. Unfortunately, the situation that Kidde is in, we're not going to see a new product come from Kidde for a few years because they got to, kind of restabilize the foundation.
Maybe yes, maybe yes. No, you're right. I mean, they're not going to hit the ground running. If they get a buyer in the next 90 days, but any buyer is going to ask that question: what have you got in the pipeline, and what's this industry all about? And so at least it will encourage that conversation at Kidde. I don't think they've had that conversation in the last 10 years, maybe 5.
It seems like it. Well, they came out with that ADS system, but I'm not sure how advanced distribution.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I agree with you. Iconic brand, just got away from it. But at the point, back to the fight point, we're trying something new, right? And we need new technology. We need new ways to solve the problems. This 855 or the battery issue is significant. We've got to find ways to get in front of it. Is that the end all be all? I don't know. I don't know enough behind the chemical they're using. I mean, they're saying it's what do they say? It's not a PFAS. It's
this is what Fike is saying about their
nearly non-conductive. It doesn't say completely non-conductive, so it's got some sort of water base to it because it's conductive at some level scientifically, and it's a high boiler. So are they using an agent that's also using transformer protection?
SF6? No.
I'm not the chemist. I don't know.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend that is, right? We could ask him. I'm sure he'll tell us, but he doesn't work for Pike, so he doesn't know the chemistry behind it.
I'm
interested to see what Pike will have to say at FSSA, because I think Rick's going to be all in front of that.
Yeah, well, I'm going to try to give him a call this week or next week. And then there's StatX too. You know, Lance Harry's company. He's got something new, something different.
Good. I'm anxious to see what it is.
No, it's been around for a while, but they're just marketing.
Oh, the aerosols, yeah.
The aerosols, yeah.
So we'll see. I want to see these manufacturers kind of stabilize so that we can get them focused on the market and developing products that the market needs.
Who would you like to see buy Kitty?
Well, Kitty's a publicly. I don't own Kidda stock, so I think I can say it. And I don't own KKR stock, so I can say it. So I really like what's going on at Potter. And I think that them recently acquired by KKR really gives them access to a nice bank account.
They can write the check.
Yeah, and they can write the check. And I think strategically, when you combine what Potter does on the control side, and their technology is some of the best in the sprinkler space, IoT compatible type devices. You take Jerry Connolly and his background in suppression, and go acquire Kidda. You're going to have a really, really strong products company. I'm not the strategist. That is purely speculation.
Well, yeah, it's all speculation. But in this case, private equity has its place. I get that. I know what benefit it's brought to our industry. You need it. I'm hoping that private equity ends up buying Kitty, and not in one of the corporate entities that are in our space right now. I think we need something new there. I think we need a new driver behind the wheel there.
I agree, but so what I like about KKR, this is their first step into fire, right? And so they partner with Jerry, who really understands the big picture of the industry, to really drive it. I agree with you. I don't want to see another fly-by-night, PE firm that's already in the space that's looking to build something and flip it and get out, or buy something that's distressed, squeeze more out of it, and then sell it. Right? Go back to the the 80s where it was just squeeze and sell. So I do hope it's a partner that sees the value in the brand and the legacy that it brings to the market, and there's product there. So
Janus seemed to have hooked up with a good private equity family family office firm. They all seem happy with their leadership there, which I'm glad. Good bunch of guys. Yeah.
Great bunch of guys, and I'm glad they've got a partner that's willing to invest in the long term for what Janus needs.
Yeah.
Right. Because what Janus needs, the industry needs it. Because you look at how Steve and the guys run that business. It's solid, very consistent. Not reactionary or emotional. It's engineering based, scientific based, and we need that.
Yeah. I heard Honeywell's going through some sort of a management shakeup, organizational changes.
Oh, big time. Dick Bauer just left after 20 some years at Honeywell.
And he joined
Potter.
Yeah. I just saw on your notes. I heard a rumor that Potter could be one of the people that would buy Kitty.
Yes, I think so. Because you got Jerry Connolly, who was an executive at Kitty, now running Potter.
I think he ran
KKR just bought him, and KKR is one of the top 5 largest PE firms in the world.
Yeah. I think Jerry was president of Kitty.
He was. Didn't he come in behind John Sullivan?
He came in, maybe not right after, but yeah. So I don't know. Could be interesting. What puzzles me a little bit. We started hearing, maybe 10 years ago, that when you looked at the suppression end of the business, you looked at, let's say, JCI buys Ansell, buys and Carrier, buys Kitty. And the story was, well, we want to be in that building.
Yeah.
We want to own that building. We want automation. We want lights. We want HVAC. We want the elevators. We want everything in that building.
Yeah.
And Johnson Controls seems to be going in that direction, but Carrier says, no, we'll pass on fire. Why did Carrier pass on fire and spin everything off? And different strategy, of course, I get that, but I just kind of wonder what's behind it. Why did Carrier seek to bail? Was the lawsuits and the foam and the PFAS in their history? They just couldn't deal with all that?
That's partly part of it. Again, you're a publicly traded company. You can't have these things hanging over your head that, you're not sure what the final check's going to look like when you pay off that settlement. Right. So that's part of it. Number one. Number two, I think if you look at, because I agree with you, the JCI acquisition strategy was around own the building, right? They wanted everything. The same can be said for Honeywell and what Honeywell's done. Siemens has done the same thing. Now Siemens has a small
I forgot that. Right? You're right.
Right. So, so they're all going after it, but I think what's interesting is, so that's on the blended manufacturer, service provider, contractor piece. We want to own and integrate the whole thing. And there's a big market for that, and they'll be successful doing it. I think that when you start to break it down, though, why does Siemens have contractors under their umbrella as Siemens alarm divisions that do work outside the Siemens portfolio?
I don't know.
Why does Simplex Cornell, now JCI Fire, they've got fire offices that do work outside the portfolio, right? Because at the end of the day, they still have to generate revenue to meet the needs of the market, number one. And number two, they can't win every major project in every major city.
Right.
Price, delivery, quality, you name it, whatever it might be. And so I think it still creates enough fracturing in the market in a good way, diversification, if you will, for enough work for everybody else to go after. I think you and I talked about this in our last podcast. History shows, John, that bigger isn't better in our space.
Yeah.
Right. Look at the run for Simplex Cornell over the last 30 years and how they've been handed off and where they're at today.
Yeah.
Look at the challenges that API Group is going through right now. And the challenges even Pi and Summit are having as they're trying to grow so fast.
Yeah, I haven't.
One model's not working. Yeah, one model's not working across the country.
Yeah.
You have to be flexible. To meet the needs of a diverse market.
But before we get off that, the Carrier thing, so because of that, I mean, everyone's got their own plan, their own strategy, and Carrier felt that it's okay, we don't need this in order to succeed in all these other things that we've got going. We just don't need that piece of the business. JCI reached a different conclusion. We're going to keep this, right? Because they're not. Is there any discussion about JCI spinning off all of its suppression work? I never hear that. Right.
No, and I thought for sure once all the settlements started coming out on National Foam has been out there for a long time. 3M's doing their thing. I mean, look at the legacy, of Ansell and Foam. I mean, they were right there with 3M. So
you're right.
That's the train coming down the track. I don't know, but JCI has been able to seem to stay away from that for for a couple of years at this point. I'm not saying it's done, but at this point. But that said, I think it's the grand scheme of things. If you look at the entire building, take a high rise, any city, fire protection systems and the services associated with the fire protection systems are probably less than 5% of the total, spend in that building. Right. And so if it's 5 or, even 8%, what's the risk? Versus, I lose the HVA air handling system. That's a couple $1 million. And a significant service contract, every year. Under the umbrella of Carrier or York or whoever. There's something that can be said there. Or the elevator. Pick one. Right? Fire is so small. But to your point, and this is the risk, the upside or the downside is also significant. One fire,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
You discharge a sprinkler system and flood a building or flood a floor.
So that's where you get back to your point about big isn't always better. A smaller company, the office that acquired Janus, they can assess the risk. They say, okay, we can deal with that risk. We understand it. We understand the factory, we understand the product, we understand the marketplace, we get it. We'll take that risk. And a carrier reaches a completely different conclusion.
Not different than 3M exiting, right? I mean, let's be realistic. 80% of 3M's revenue is from the consumer.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's assume that 80% of their stock price value is from the consumer, not institutional lending. So in that context, I stroke a check for $10 billion to draw a line in the sand for environmental liability.
Yeah.
I'm not paying 11.
Yeah. Right.
I just kept my expense, and I can pay that over 30 years. Right.
Yeah.
But my stock price is going to continue to perform.
Yeah.
Because I don't have this leakage over here. So, and that's the issue that we have with these publicly traded companies too, right? So you look at, again, the performance in our industry and who's, where the opportunities are today. To me, it's still the strong regional guys and the regional platforms to really go execute in I'll call it local market, but pick, something that's, 6 or 7 states around you and not trying to be 40. You just can't. The model doesn't. The service delivery model that you have in Alabama is not the same service delivery model that you need in Arizona.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or South Dakota or Montana. That whole thing there too.
Yeah, I mean, I've got an example, John, that I just picked up on. Big company acquirer goes in with their local office into a very large healthcare organization and says, okay, we know you've been getting service this way for 20 years, but we're no longer going to provide service that way.
Yeah.
If we're going to maintain your account, we're doing this.
Yeah.
And the hospital provider said, if you change the model, you're fired.
Yeah.
Right. And so who's right? Is the contractor's role our job to say, here's how we're going to deliver the service? Or is it the customer's role or opportunity to kind of set expectations? And I think there's an opportunity to meet in the middle. I'm not saying, the customers, has all the opportunity to say, here's what they want, because the codes tell you differently. But we are the experts to say, here's how we can deliver the service that makes sense. Mm. But it's a local discussion and nothing you can make from the corporate office and say, here's what we're doing.
A couple of years ago at an FSSA conference, I always forget the name of the economist that we've had back a couple of times. He's coming back again this year. What's his name?
One of the Bolio brothers.
Yeah.
ITR, right? ITR Economics or something like that.
Right. And somebody asked, okay, give us your 5 things that we should look for in the next, coming years, the 5 big things we should worry about or think about. And one of them was big buys from big, right? Big buys from big. And I heard that. I go, okay, we're not really big. So should I really worry about that? And I get, and we saw that over the last couple of years. And you're talking about this right now. This company, this big, roll up fire company, thought they could go in because they're big and sell to this healthcare company because they're big and they're going to want to buy from big. And it doesn't always work. Maybe in the beginning it sounded good. Well, I'll give my business to the big guy because they got to know what they're doing. Doesn't always work that way, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, same example, same conversation. Big company went into a big power plant and said, we're changing your service model again after 20 years. Big power plant said, you changed the model, we're changing the contract and you're out. Right. So it's the same thing. And it's like, how do you, especially in our industry, I mean, we don't have a standard set of codes and standards across the US. Yes, NFPA writes a standard set, but the adoption rate's different. Right. And so the codes in Georgia are different than the codes in Tennessee, and the states bump up against each other. And so the model that works in Georgia, line and verse, does not work in Tennessee.
Right. No, you're absolutely right about that. And the other thing too is response time. Pick up the phone and say, yes, I'll be there, question. And it's not an easy thing to do when you're 3 layers from the company, the guy that he doesn't even own the company, he's managing the company. You're 3 layers down, and you need a technician to travel 25 miles to get to one of your important customers on a Saturday.
Yep.
You know, it's
and
now,
corporate office says we're not paying overtime anymore because we got to cut costs.
right. Now, some entrepreneurial type, and we know who they are. They're out there right now. They're going to say, I can do this thing better. You know, they're going to hang up a shingle,
Yeah.
going to go across the street, and they're going to take their bag with a bunch of accounts in it, and they're going to service them. That's what's going to happen.
And that's what I love about our industry, John. And you and I've talked about this a number of times, both in podcasts and written and offline. That is why our industry is resilient, because you know, big company comes in, buys small or medium-sized company, and within 6 months, boom, 3 more companies pop up because the service manager and 3 technicians were upset, right? Boom, okay, now they start. And in 10 years, that's going to be a $10 million company that's now ready for sale.
If you've got a knowledge base, as many of these technicians, there's some really bright fire technicians in this industry, you know, that's in their head, you know, and nobody owns that except them. They can do whatever they want with that. So, yeah. But yeah, I think you alluded to there being some cracks in this model, huh?
No, you're right with regard to the technicians. At the end of the day, have a relationship with the customer, right?
Yeah.
They know expectations, they know how to deliver the service, and they know the code inside and out, right? And that's how the service is delivered.
Right. And you know, and it's a relatively easy business to get into. You know, we know this from the extinguisher service side. You know, remember the old the door was rag and tag, or it's really easy to get into. You know, the special hazard side, you know, maybe not as easy, but you know, yeah, you're right. It's that churn there is a good thing for us.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's the health, and I think we're going to see that. You know, there's some
and one more thing on that.
Go ahead.
The special hazard segment of our industry is even more specialized, and the bigger you get, the harder it is for corporate America to really understand and get that aspect of the business. They just don't get that. They, you know, how much are you going to do this year? Well, hopefully what we did last year and maybe a little bit more. Can you be a little bit more specific? No, I really can't. No, it's, you know, I'm joking about that a little bit, but it's probably a bit of a reflection of the way our industry works and one of the reasons why, you know, the large corporations just have a tough time dealing with special hazards.
Well, yeah, they want that cookie cutter model. They want the predictable model to say, listen, okay, for every fire extinguisher I have, it's going to equate X. But they can't do that for every special hazard system.
Yep,
right?
Exactly.
Or every install or every upgrade, right? Because it's not that repetitive. It's there. It's just a little bit different.
Yeah.
So I do think, you know, that's one of the challenges that we have as it relates to, you know, this consolidation. It is squeezing out some of these specialty trades to the periphery, right? Changes to the special hazards guys because of that model. And again, it's transition. You know, that work still has to get done. It's just going to get done in a different manner.
Yeah, right.
And then,
Yeah.
You know, how's it installed? Who installs it? You know, is there a way to use more technology to do more monitoring of the systems and not necessarily deploying a technician every time you've got to go do an inspection?
John, do you draw a distinction when you look at the roll-ups that have been going on in the country, in our industry over the last, you know, 5-10 years? Do you draw a distinction between the publicly traded companies and privately held PE companies? Are they reacting to the marketplace differently? And is there, I want to think that companies that are private equity owned and not publicly traded have a little more flexibility in their operations. Am I right or no?
You're right. You're right, because they're leaning on the operator to truly call the shots as it relates to performance, as it relates to growth. You know, in some cases, they may put, you know, a financial expert on the board that's going to ask questions. But, you know, I haven't seen the PE firms come in and say, no, we disagree with what you're doing and we want you to do X. Unless that owner or the operator is running the business into the ditch, and that's a different conversation.
Yeah, but the drive for earnings. Again, I don't live in that world, and I'm this is pure speculation on my part, but the drive for earnings in the public sphere has got to be much more intense. I know that it's intense. If KKR owns you, there's some intensity there. They're not, they're not a sandbox that you're playing in. It's a real tough environment. But is it as tough as when you're publicly traded?
So, and I can share my experiences at Tyco being publicly traded. I mean, our performance was driven quarter to quarter, month to month.
Yeah.
Right? Because when you had that stockholder call, you had to talk about how the business was performing.
Yeah.
That was all businesses in the portfolio. And so in the PE space, it's a different conversation. Yes, directionally, you want to know how the business is performing month to month. And yes, you want to be able to share good information or at least a good understanding at a board meeting every quarter. But the PE guys aren't in this business for the quarterly dividend. PE guys are in the business for spending the money on the front end because they get a bonus, and then they're incentivizing the back end at the exit.
Yeah, right.
And so, yes, you still want the performance in the middle, but it's all about growth.
Yeah.
You need to feed the beast to grow, and that's either through acquisitions primarily, because I don't think you can put, you run some data. My instincts say you're not seeing much organic growth office to office. It's through acquisition. So in that context, right, it's all about the exit strategy and how you get there.
But you're saying
maximize the sell price at the back end.
Are you saying that in our space, you're not seeing much organic growth office to office?
No, I mean, I bet you it's less than 5%.
Okay.
In the acquired companies, the standalones, I think, are doing fine.
Right. In the acquired companies,
because,
right.
And the reason I say that the acquired companies is because all the internal energy is focused on the next acquisition. The resources that you have existing in your current office now being asked to go to the acquired office to go train them on how to operate a tech stack or how to use a service management platform that they didn't use before, right? Or your inventory is under pressure because now you're pulling inventory off of Office A for Office B.
I wonder, and I'm probably being way too reductionist here, but I wonder if the acquired company here, whether it's one of the legacies that went in the last, year or two, or one of the smaller companies, I wonder if they lose a little bit of their fire when founder leaves, management takes over. I wonder if that could be part of the reasons why you're not seeing organic growth there, because the fire just got turned down a little bit.
So I think it all has to deal with how the deals themselves are structured, right? If there's an earnout, that owner's going to keep the business in between the guardrails because, hey, I go one way or the other, I lose my payout.
Yeah.
Right? So that's the first part. And the second part is, okay, if it's not an earnout and they've got longer term equity, what they say, chips back on the table.
Yeah.
Right? Second bite at the apple. Okay. Now, so I think it all depends on that perspective as to where's the offer and how is the deal structured.
Are you seeing that? I mean, I've talked to some of the people that have left and some of the people that have remained, and there are people who are doing it right. People are really excited about that. But I wonder if you look at the whole picture here. I wonder if on net that you don't lose some of that fire that you have when guy or gal goes out there, hangs out their own shingle, busts their home for 5, 7, 10 years, builds it up, and then they get a big check gets written, somebody else comes in. It's got to have some effect on growth. It's got to.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree. I mean, let's be honest. Like you said, there's something to be said about sweat equity and rolling your sleeves up every morning, and like you said, hanging that shingle and doing it yourself. Now you get someone who just stroked a nice big check, and they may have the commitment, but the return isn't as great.
Right. And I think there are some really great managers out there running really good shops for really big companies. I know that. You know that too. We both know them. But there's a difference between a really great manager and a really great founder.
Oh, heck yeah.
Yeah.
But that great manager is going to be a great operator locally.
Yep.
But that manager
Yep.
had some strategic foresight to figure out what does the business need to do and how do we
Yep.
get there.
Yep.
Right. And unfortunately, I think that, we're losing a lot of those founders.
Yeah.
Well,
but at
because
the
they
same
had their
time,
off ramps and what have you.
we're creating them at the same time, as you said before. People just leave and hang up their own shingle. We're creating them too, which that's the dynamics of our industry.
Yeah, and in 2021 and 22 or 2020 and 2021, 22 were some of the greatest number of companies acquired, right? So you saw significantly number more owners exit than you do in normal years. So let's say it was double in that period of time where we're going from 50 to 100, 100 to 150 acquisitions. Now we're back down to around 50 or less. Now it's more manageable.
What do you see 2024 looking like in terms of acquisitions?
I see we're going to be at the same rate we're at this year, which takes us back to where we were in 2016, 2017.
Yeah.
A couple of strategic platforms trading hands. So to your point, big going to bigger. But you have family-owned businesses that are selling for the first time to a smaller platform. We have platforms that are building their own and the right way. Good family office partner or some investment group that really understands how to nurture relationships. And this is a 5-year marathon and not a 5-year sprint or 2-year sprint.
You see any big legacy distributors selling this year?
I think it's just trading. I think there's speculation about where does Summit fit long term in as it relates to their owner, which is BlackRock.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've been owned by BlackRock since 2021. Griffin held on to Potter for 6 years. Right, so it's about a 5 to 7 year play.
But what about the distributors? Do you see any legacy distributors finally cashing out?
Not necessarily, because I don't necessarily know who's left that's interested in selling. Because if they were interested in selling, they would have sold in the last 3 years.
Yeah, like a BFP.
Those big legacy guys, all of our friends have sold, right?
All of our friends, yeah. You're probably right. They would have done it already.
Right. But there are still good companies to buy. It's just that you've got to work a little bit differently to try to get into the market and find them.
Yeah.
And those ones that are interested in selling now aren't necessarily interested in selling to those big firms. They're looking for a different path.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the TMG Fireside Chat. We really, really enjoy having these conversations with a number of industry leaders and always look forward to being able to release them to those that want to listen and share in the conversation. We hope you enjoyed this topic, and we look forward to our next release. Have a great day and be safe.